you go. All
How do I
right.
get it to go away?
Which
That's
thing?
fine.
We're good. All right. All right. Let's get it going. Good. All
Yeah.
right. Okay. Welcome to the Leader Mentality Show with Rob Clemens. We are here with a very special guest today. And I brought her on before I introduce her because so often we talk about leadership in businesses and we talk about businesses branding themselves properly and the need for that. But today we're going to talk about something a little different. It's a segment of branding, which is branding yourself properly. So not only do I have a special guest, I have a special guest host. My guest host is a CCU intern working with us, Lauren. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
All right. Well, and she's here because she actually met our guest through a event at Coastal Carolina University. So I think this is a great way for you guys to rekindle and also for us to talk about some knowledge that'll hopefully help everybody out. But without further ado, I do want to introduce Diane Yarborough. She is the founder of Cranberry Way, and welcome to the show.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, it's so great to be here.
Well, I tell you what, anytime that you can get together and spread some knowledge on leadership, we're going to take that every single time. And I found it really great that when I was reading about you, that you are the culture architect. Tell me a little bit about that. What does that mean?
Yeah, no, thank you. Culture architecture really is, a coined term to design and explain the design and the work that we do to help our organizations build and create cultures that are amazing. So I feel like just like an architect builds a house and there has to be a strong foundation and there has to be some really great strategies and you have to plan effectively so that things don't fall down. Similarly, in HR and organizational development, same thing. We need to make sure that the organization is strong and that the facets are there to ensure that things don't fall. And ultimately to create an environment where people can thrive and employees are happy.
I really
Ultimately.
like it that you're putting it like that because if you look at my background, of course, I've done some dabbling in construction over my life. And you're right, you would never start building a home without a set of plans and an engineer to back check it. And of course, all along the way, you're going to keep going through that home and making sure it's developing properly. But we in organizations, all too often, you just get into something and you say, this is what I want to do for my living. So you just start building your organization and don't take that chance to step back and say, am I hiring the right people? Am I training properly? So this is where you come in with your business.
Yes, absolutely. So I'll help leaders and executives ensure that they've got the right assessments to design the right attraction. Are they attracting the right people? Are you developing and training the people the way that you need from a business perspective, as well as are we providing an environment where the employees are thriving and getting the development that they want? Right. I was always told one of the coin terms I remember when I was young in my career was, happy cows produce better milk. And that one kind of stuck with me. And I figured it's so true these days. That was back in the 80s and 90s, but it really is. Our employees are crucial to the success of our organizations. And if they're not thriving, then they're not going to stay.
I like that. Are you going to be throwing farmer references at me the whole time?
I did grow up in Nebraska, so
I saw that. Yeah, so you went to Nebraska, so you're a corn husker through and through. Very cool. Very cool. What brought you to this area?
I met my husband at a Disney wedding when I was working down in Orlando, and so I am out in the Charlotte area, and so you never know where you're going to meet your husband, and it happened to be at a Disney wedding, and
very cool.
I wasn't planning on meeting my husband that night. I was just going to a wedding of a friend's that had an open bar and a great DJ and
a good husband material there. So
you never know.
Well, that's very cool. Well, let's talk about clients a little bit. I don't know if you can see my hat, but we got a little Margaritaville action. Lauren's actually got a little Margaritaville action going on today. And when she met you, you were at Coastal Carolina University with Margaritaville, and you were talking about internships and finding the right path for yourself. And so Lauren had said, what a great job you did speaking. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with Margaritaville.
Absolutely. I have known some of the leaders in the Margaritaville business for years and years and years when we met back at Disney, back in the days when I was working in Orlando. And a couple of years ago, we, had connected again to say, I think when New York City was opening, I was reaching out to say congratulations. And I said, I can imagine you're pretty busy. There's a lot of things moving in the organization. And it got to be that we both had the conversation with some of the leaders that Disney had a really neat internship program that we both worked and were familiar with. And luckily, we decided to go into some discussions about starting something like that for Margaritaville. And so that's what I do with them. It's my job with them is we designed and manage and run this internship program for them.
What's the key to finding a good intern? If you're a company, and I want to talk about it from the intern standpoint, because we do have some students to listen, but what's the key for a company to find the right intern for them?
I think for the company to find the right intern is to make sure that the company knows what they're looking for, and to ensure that from an internship perspective, to make sure they're designing a program that interns will be attracted to. I think they've got to find a way to reach our students right now and make an opportunity relevant to their educational component. We need to make sure that it's relevant to the students' interests. And then it's fun. At the end of the day, the students don't want to, right, Lauren, you don't want to sit in an office and file all summer. So I think the managers, culture, organizations need to take a look at what they're looking for, make sure that they have a strong kind of strategy on what they want to have the interns do. Not just say, come in for the summer and we'll figure it out. So I think the students are smarter than that these days, and they're going to be looking for something that's going to benefit them in the long run. And ultimately, it's an educational component. So what are you going to teach them?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Well, at Margaritaville, I do know I've been to Orlando a few times. And so my wife and I usually go there about once a year, and we eat at the Margaritaville there all the time. And then we go to this one in Myrtle Beach. And do you know how many locations they have right now?
They have, I'm able to staff 14 of the locations, and they have over 60 plus, depends on who you talk to and what day you're talking about. Things are moving all the time. So I primarily work with the restaurants, the cafes, the Margaritaville cafes and Landshark bars and grills, but the brand is growing and substantially moving and shaking around the country.
Very cool.
During your presentation at Coastal, I remember you talked a lot about Jimmy Buffett. I was wondering if you actually ever met him.
No, I never did. I've known his music since I was 7. I remember learning about this song about some man looking for a shaker of salt, and I thought that was odd. I felt like I've known him forever. I've been a fan since the 70s, but no, I never got a chance to meet him. But in everybody that you talk to who has, he just was a warm, kind, smart, immensely smart businessman. And I wish I would have.
Oh, totally. I mean, well, I'll tell you what, you talk about somebody who has met and inspired so many people. A leader mentality show, we talk about that all the time. There were people after his unfortunate passing this last year who, I mean, they took it tragically. You look at the mark you leave on the world. These are people who are like, after it happened, just, were making homages in their own ways. And when I was down in Orlando last time, the Margaritaville bartender said, yeah, we got a big rush right after that where people just want to come down and be a part of it. Right. So,
yeah. And they still do. And I think that will always be, I think the benefit of the brand and especially the locations that we're in, it really is kind of a calling. People do, start talking to a complete stranger because, it's a destination. People are going there to be around people who appreciate and value what Jimmy was about. And now even more so pay homage to that. And now even more so, Lauren, we want to make sure there's the legacy continues. I think someone referred to him as the modern day Mark Twain, and the poet that he was and the artist that he was, that a lot of people don't really understand all of the magic in his songwriting. They just think he was the fun guy that didn't wear shoes on stage. So
Right, right,
There's a
right.
lot more to him. Yeah.
Well, and there always is,
Yeah.
one of the reasons that sometimes people ask me why I have a little heartbeat on my leader mentality logo, but
Mm.
it's because of the fact that there's usually something driving you. There's something in your heart that has
Mhm.
led you to do what you're doing. And people don't always see the work that's going on behind the scenes that makes you like you are. So I really like to give people a chance to talk about what's that thing that inspires you, which is a great segue for us, by the way, Diane, because like right now I want to talk about the Cranberry Way, and you talked about that you attract, you excite, and you retain great talent. And in 2023, this has got to be one of the biggest challenges we have out there. Everybody needs better staff, they need more staff. So how did you get into this business?
Mm. Well, I feel like the springboard and my training ground was 20 years at Disney. I had the opportunity to be groomed and built from the ground up professionally inside a very well-oiled, strong culture. And unlike other people, I had a pretty great front row seat to watching and learning great leaders, understanding and watching a really strong, unique business. And I had a pretty great fun career. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed my years at Disney. It was a business just like anywhere else, but anything you think or read about Disney is true. It's positive. Where else would you want to work where your main business is making memories for families? And
Oh, yeah.
so I really fell in love with what Walt was about and where he came from. And my experience as an employee was I had some pretty neat magical experiences as an employee, or what we called cast members, right? So Cranberry Way was founded in a way to help bring that to other organizations.
Mhm.
I felt like I was pretty lucky. I had a pretty neat tool belt. I got a really good toolbox after my years in HR there and learning and training and culture in HR, that I felt like I felt like other people should have that same opportunity. And so that's what we do. We work with organizations to find somewhere in the employee life cycle, all the way from attraction to even sunsetting and alumniing, the employee experience, and how can we make it better for the employees, ultimately the cast. Because I felt like I had a really neat training ground there. That was a really strong part of our business, was our cast experience.
Mhm.
And not everybody gets that.
Well, so interesting to me. That's very interesting. I find that some of these companies are very small. Like, you want to ask that question about the Margaritaville?
Like, how exactly do you guys utilize your interns? What do they do? Are they behind the scenes?
Okay. So how the opportunity that we give our interns is a couple fold. Number one, I tell the students that a key part of the internship experience is understanding the brand of Margaritaville, and that comes through a guest experience. So we want our interns to see the guests and their experience and what and why they come to a Margaritaville. Of all the places they can go, why Margaritaville? What is it about the culture, the experience that draws them in, and what could you learn about that? So that's the first piece. I feel like that they need to experience the brand that way. And then I do think from an internship perspective, ultimately from a learning perspective, what we want to teach you is, how does a business run? Not everybody gets to work in a large national chain. There's way different corporate standards are very different when you've got to get, your standards across the entire organization. So the learning that usually comes after, where you sit back and you go, oh yeah, I remember seeing that. Or, you really don't think about what you're learning in the moment. But the opportunity that we give our interns is, let me show you how a business runs. Let's see what leadership looks like at all levels. We give you access to our executives. We want you to see and understand what goes through their minds. And we want you to take something away from that perspective. And then your local leaders are the ones who then are your day-to-day field, out in the field. And is stuff coming from corporate down to our field is that message being translated, and is there congruency in the message? And I think there's a lot of lessons that come from that. Some leaders are great at, in my experience, some of my leaders were amazing at leadership and motivating and inspiring, and ensuring that I was moving in the right direction. And so I think as an intern, it's not going to be in your face that we're teaching you this, but it's some really neat life experience that you get as well.
Well, it's interesting, and I knew that I had a little birdie tell me what she was going to ask me earlier, so I knew she was going there. But I felt like it was a great time to ask, right? Because you're talking about Disney, and I don't know how many interns Disney has at any given time, but I mean, it's got to be hundreds, or is it upwards of hundreds
Of people, thousands.
of interns? No, I'm just
tens
talking.
of thousands. Yeah.
So you're saying thousands of interns working at a time, or just
Yeah.
wow?
Tens of thousands. Yeah, I think their new housing complex called Flamingo Crossing it houses thousands.
My gosh. Well, so we're speaking on a show where there's some business owners who might just need one intern. I'm that guy, right? Right now I am. And then you have Margaritaville, who maybe needs quite a few more than that. And then you have Disney. But you say you start with understanding the brand. And I think that's so important, because a lot of times if you bring somebody in and they don't understand why what you're doing is special, they miss all the opportunity. And that's one of the first steps of the culture. So I love that you said that. What did you like about working at Disney best?
Oh boy. I really loved the leadership component. First and foremost, I was an intern myself down there. I started on the college program, so I'm well aware of the intern life. And sometimes you just have to do some things you may or may not want to do. I think I call it the Burger King of Epcot. Was my job for a summer. But I fell in love with the company, and I really appreciated, the innovation that Walt was about, the first to use Technicolor, when Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs came out, they thought people were going to go blind because it was the longest feature full-length animation movie.
They rarely thought people were going to go blind.
Yeah,
they'd never done it before, so
they had never seen a full-length feature animation back in the day. So Walt was all about taking the newest and greatest and capitalizing on it. So he was the first multi-plane camera in the world of animation. So he was an innovator. And I think that
these innovators, you think about Howard Hughes, you think about these guys, you find a different way to do something that nobody else thinks you can do.
Yeah. So I think I call that this blue ocean strategy that's out there right now, this concept of blue ocean versus red ocean. But I do think, that was some of the funnest thing. And then Disney when I was there, was going through immense growth, such opportunity. I had some really fun jobs. I started on the internship program at this Burger King at Epcot. It's called Stargate Restaurant. It's gone now, thank God. But the makeup was still there, right? It was a quick service restaurant. But when I came back, when I went back to college, I went to go work in hotels and fell in love with the resort business, and went to go work at the Four Diamond Cornhusker Hotel back in Lincoln, Nebraska.
Yeah.
That was the only Four Diamond property in town. But I got bit by the Disney bug. So as soon as I graduated college, I was back in touch with my recruiter, and I said, I want to come back, and I'll do anything. I'll work in housekeeping. I'll be a lifeguard, whatever. But I went back into front desk with a 4-year degree in psychology, and I was checking guests in at the front desk for 2 years. And I think what I learned most about is the opportunity that you've got to take. I've got numbers and numbers of experiences of people, tapping me on the shoulder and saying, have you thought about this? And jumping on it, and not saying no, or not, overthinking it, to take every opportunity we're given. So, that contemporary. So I went back to the Contemporary Resort, had some really fun check-ins. I got to check in Dick Clark, and I hung out on the concierge level with some baseball players and John Travolta, and hobnob with some cool celebrities.
Who was your favorite one? Who was your favorite one you met over the time?
John Travolta, I really enjoyed meeting him up on the concierge floor, and him and Kelly Preston were there. Just, a normal guy, just trying to have, a fun Disney experience with his family.
Yeah.
And so you figure our celebrities need just a little bit of protection. They don't get to walk on the rides like everyone else. So they get a little bit more attention than everybody else, but rightly so. They should have the same rights to, enjoy their theme parks with their families. So we take good care of them. Yeah, I could go on and on.
Right. Yeah,
I
well,
won't
I
go into
sidetracked you a
details.
little, but you can't throw Travolta at me and think I don't have a backup question, right? He's one of those guys who, if you haven't checked out, and Lauren, she's a CCU student, so give her a break here, but if you go back to, of Travolta from some of his probably later stuff now, but if you YouTube a old Saturday Night Fever or whatever those things were, this guy could dance. He was he's a pretty cool guy.
He was cool. Yeah, he
Yeah.
was pretty cool. Very popular back in the day, right? But the Bee Gees, no one cares about them, but I had some of the Bee Gees on my floor.
Oh,
And then, yeah, so I mean, I think Barry Bonds was there. We had some baseball players that come up, and Joan Rivers, and I think they were opening up Planet Hollywood, and so we had all the celebrities there for the opening of Planet Hollywood, and who needed the newest limo and who would only drive a newest limo, and so we had a lot of divas show up, in certain places. So
oh yeah, I got you. I can only imagine. So and before we get away from the Disney too far, because I do want to get into what inspired you to start Cranberry Way, but what would you say the Bob Iger era looked like?
So, I think before there was Bob, there was Michael and Frank. And so I was there for the Michael Frank era that really established the company in a really neat, strong footing during the Lion King days to the Toy Story days. So the Pixar theme parks were opening, resorts were opening. I think Michael and Frank Wells started this amazing company, got us immensely on the map, and Bob came in and just kept it going. And we're a first name company, so Bob is Bob. He's not Mr. Iger. Michael was Michael. Mickey is Mickey. But Bob Iger, as you can see through the the latest and greatest news over the last 10 years, he was a solid leader for the organization and helped us through immense growth again. And like I still work there. The company fell on just tough times, just like everyone else through COVID. That period of time really challenged and tested our strength, the strength of the company, and so people are still coming out of that, and we're bouncing back, and the world's opening up again. But Bob was a really strong leader, and he's got a great book. If anyone ever wants to go read a book about leadership, I think it's called Ride of a Lifetime. I forget.
I've read the book, and I was going to plug that actually because it's got a great talk about innovation and leadership, and he has his own traits of a great leader. So definitely check that book out. Good stuff. Before we get away from Disney, what's your favorite ride at Disney? If you're going to Disney World tomorrow, what are you riding?
Right. My favorite attraction, we refer to them as attractions, is the Ride of the Resistance is now the new one. So that's the last one that was my newest, latest, and greatest that I saw at Christmas. I actually went at Christmas, which was crazy. But I was very impressed with Ride of the Resistance and the experience there. And growing up with Star Wars, obviously it was like literally walking into some of the greatest movie scenes ever. So.
And yeah, pretty powerful stuff. Well, very cool. So now you learned tremendous amount of stuff from Disney, and it sounds like you still have a passion in that heart for Disney, which I can appreciate. Mm-hmm. Cranberry Way, why'd you start it, and where are you at with it?
Again, I started it because when I left Disney, there was still this toolbox I had. And while I was not physically working for the company anymore, I needed to put that to good use. And I see companies and cultures in a way differently. Disney taught us to look at things a little differently, as the innovator normally would, as Walt was a true pioneer. But knowing that the challenges that we're facing, realizing the joy that I had in bringing teams and individual leaders to change and transform their business in a way where employees thrive. And the culture gets smarter, and we're just providing a better environment for our business to thrive. Again, the model really was leadership excellence leads to great cast experience, which then leads to great guest experience, which of course will ensure their intent to return. So that was my mantra, and I was out in the real world and I didn't see that everywhere. And I felt like, well, someone needs to put that in. So that's what Cranberry Way really was to do, was to take some great, pretty well proven cultural techniques and trips over from a very well founded company to some of the lesser, smaller companies that may or may not have an army of 800 HR people to help them.
Yeah, but you know what? It's really a thing we all have to think about. I like to look at the biggest companies and try to mimic them at a smaller level, because it's like, you don't have to be Disney with thousands and thousands of employees to run similar principles. In fact, I'm a big Universal Studios fan, so mention our rival here, of course. But if you went to their park post-COVID, they had figured out a way to get thousands and thousands of people safely in a park by just innovative things, spacing techniques, the way that they were treating the rides, putting the stuff on your hands before every ride. And it's like, we at the small levels with our 5 and 10 and 20 employees are struggling with it. I always like to look at it and say, hey, if Disney and Universal can figure it out, we can figure it out too. So I love what you're doing there.
Yeah, it doesn't take an army of 800 HR people to figure. It doesn't take a strong OD department. I think it really does just take some smart, leadership, people who are willing to sit down and think things differently. I just think everything has to be rethought right now. Everything we thought was normal, everything we thought was standard. Those of us who have been in the corporate America have seen an evolution anyways. And it's always, you have to stay, you have to change. It's the only thing that's constant. But even more so now, it just takes a really innovative mind and someone willing to think a little bit outside the box, take a little bit of innovation to what they're doing, focus in something that they maybe haven't thought of before, and try it, right? So Disney was very famous for piloting, trying things. Some things they worked. Some things worked in our company and some things didn't over the time. But we still had to go for it, right?
Absolutely. Tell me, why is customer service struggling in 2023? Because we see it, right? I mean, everywhere you go to a restaurant, you sit down for 10 minutes before anybody's coming seeing you. You go into a store, some of the employees barely want to say hello and welcome. What's going on and how did we get here?
Well, I think there's two things. Number one, I think there's a labor shortage, right? I think at the end of the day, you can't provide great guest service if you're not staffed.
Right.
And I know that that's not as basic as it sounds, but that's one thing. There's ways to mitigate if you don't have the staff that you need. I think you have to go back to some of the basics, right? So, and some of that is people just reconnecting to the customer. That relationship from the customer to the associate is crucial. And so inventory and paperwork and phone calls and all the things that managers do, it's easy to forget about the customer experience.
Yeah.
And so, at Disney, we had to go through this a couple times, but there was a time when we had to come back to some basic guest service. And Disney used to say, if you dog it till you get it done. Mm-hmm. And another favorite phrase of mine is, you inspect what you expect. And so if we're expecting better customer service, how are we inspecting it? And how are you tracking it? And we believed greatly on numbers and measurement and ensuring that we're tracking the impact of good or bad service, because numbers don't really lie that much.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I think we do have to remember that we just have to remember sometimes that the customers are not an impediment to our quality of our day. They are the key to the quality of our day. Right. So sometimes when they're walking in and you're like, oh man, it's 10 minutes to close and somebody's walking in, you got to remember they're the ones who ultimately pay our bills and keep our jobs going. So you got to treat them good, right?
Yeah.
Let me ask you this, Generation Z, how do you think they are different? How do you motivate Generation Z compared to other generations?
I think they get a bad rap, right? I think Z or X or I or whatever we're talking about right now, Z or
Keep
I
laughing.
Gen or Z Gen, whatever
Yeah.
the name is right now. I think there's some really neat innovators out there. And I think we're the ones who have the problem with it, right? Us older generation folk. I do think their world is different. I remember learning at one point back in the 80s or 90s that, this generation has grown up with an hourglass, spinning. And, if you think about some of the things that they've only known about that have been in their life ever since they were children, their world is very different. And I am slow sometimes as well to understand the technology, and I'm not on TikTok yet, or some of the other things that you guys they're so much smarter about it. But I just think that we're not motivating them the right way. I think we're using a square peg in a round hole. I think there's some really neat innovations that we need to consider in our businesses and in our thinking. I think sometimes it's just rethinking it, and spending some time really understanding, right? Always seek to understand is what Covey says. If you seek to understand, it'll help, right? There's always kind of a Heisman arm to these, they're afraid of them, right? Just they fear change.
For sure. Well, no, I usually when I'm starting off talking to a group, I always say we need to embrace the Gen Zs and understand that they're motivated, hardworking. They believe in efficiency over, just spending a bunch of time doing something. And these are all things that we can adopt and bless. So, well, listen, we have about 6-7 minutes left, and I was hoping you could give us a few tips to finding, that best, technique for a company. So if you would you want to share a couple of highlights from an expert like yourself.
Yeah, no, I think from a organizational standpoint, and especially as new emerging leaders and maybe those multi-generational leaders who are looking at embracing a multi-generational approach, I think if we first think of the fact that our name, as a young leader, our name is your brand, right? So when we think about how do we prepare our young emerging leaders for the future so they can take over these spots for us one day, because we'll want to keep these businesses going, is how are you using your brand and your personal brand? And for those of us that don't have a Nike swoosh or a Mickey ear, our name is our brand. And I found that my Disney career kept coming back to some basics of, if you make a good name for yourself, you will be remembered. And it was because of the relationships and the name I had made for ourselves and myself that enabled me to open more doors and provided me greater opportunities for growth. So I feel like that's number one. Your name is your brand, and you've got to have a strong personal brand. The other thing I learned early is you never burn a bridge, because you just never know. Looking back in my career, I would not be at Margaritaville working with Margaritaville now if I didn't have a great relationship with a leader 20 years ago who remembered me and who I stayed in touch with. So I think that's really important, and to stay in touch with people, right? So making sure that that's strong. And then I think at the end of the day, just always consider the end, always focus on the end in mind, right? So start something with your end in mind, and know that there is an end, but you've got to create, your path may look a little different, and your path will change, and your ending may change, but that's okay, right? It's a journey. Life is a journey. It's not about the destination.
And I love that. We start off talking about building your personal brand, and I'm going to just chime off of a couple of things you said. Very, very, very good tips. Name is your brand. A lot of times I always tell people that everything you do today is your audition for tomorrow. So when you're having that bad day and you think you're about to mail it in, you might have met that one person that could have changed your trajectory just in the way you handled yourself. So never forget that. Don't burn a bridge. I love that one. And I think it goes both ways for the business owners out there and managers. Remember, your employees don't want to burn a bridge with you, but you want to burn a bridge with your employees. Sometimes they're going to be on their way up and you may need them in the future. So don't just, pull that card. And then start with the end in mind. You said it very succinctly. I love that. I always tell people, I like to think 5 years into the future and look back at myself right now and say, how am I going to get to that goal? And it's my way of just kind of keeping myself on the right path, because if you ever look at, you'll hear these stories, Lauren, the person who's 80 years old and they're like, if I could go back, I would do this. Well, it's like, right now, you're not 80 years old. You have the opportunity to do whatever you want to. So I appreciate the opportunity. Well, that's 3 great tips. And I feel like you could probably speak with us for a couple of hours, but we got like 2 minutes left. So I do appreciate you being on the show. And
Sure.
we definitely want to hear more from you. How can people find you, Diane?
Sure, no, absolutely. My company is Cranberry Way. I'm at cranberryway.com. And I am, working, like I said, I live in Charlotte. I'd love to hear from anybody who's looking for help with their organization or just may need a creative tip or trick on something that can move their needle, if even 2%, right? The trajectory completely changes. And sometimes I just tell people, maybe you just need a new, fresh idea. Maybe the wiring just needs a little refreshment. So happy to help someone think through a challenge or help kind of get through to the next area. I've seen a lot. I've had a great career, had some fun working in the cruise industry and the resorts and telecom. And so there's a lot of industries I've worked in. And at the end of the day, regardless of what company we're in, regardless of what your product is, if you don't have great people who are inspired every day and they don't want to come to work every day, you're not going to have a great, strong company for a very long time.
Great people make great customer service. Great customer service makes more business, and then we can get more people, and it all cycles around. So,
Right.
well, very good stuff, Diane. I really appreciate you being on the show today. She is Diane Yarborough from Cranberry Way. Check her out. Go to her website, and it sounds like she handles companies of all sizes. So I recommend you guys check her out. But thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me. You guys have a great afternoon.
Absolutely. And for
Okay.
those of you who listen to the Leader Mentality Show, we appreciate you guys tuning in with us. Make sure to like and share us on your social media and mediums of preference. And also thanks to the Leaders List companies that support the Leader Mentality Show. Check them out if you're looking for a good company out there. We'll put the QR code on the screen. And otherwise, this is Rob Clemens. Build your personal brand. And we will see you guys next time on the Leader Mentality Show with Rob Clemens and Lauren Simcoe. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.